Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, Karate Brothers. In the last episode, we met Ed Parker, Mr. Karate. And today, we're going to meet him again. Only this time, we're going to meet him through the people who knew him, through the people that he taught karate to the people who learned from him, and from the people that loved him. But first, we've got to enter the dojo. And to get into the dojo, you've got to go through the crucible of a warrior.
Feel a flame, hammer in hand, carved out his name. 16 and airborne boots in the dirt, jumping through walls, unbaptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel, champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, a warrior's no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the mat, but he rose with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forging Hank's domain. 30 throws, 9 dances, a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shudo elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every K a name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no more playtime. Saw came in, fist like a stone, said put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you crawl, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the mat, but he rose with the roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it not on fame but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline rule. It's a crucible, baby, not a stage or set. You earn every inch, every beat of sweat. Elvis hit the mat, but he rose with a roar. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior. They burned through the fire, broke through the fear. In the dojo, legends and kings stood clear. Crucible of a warrior. Elvis was here.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear the echoes of Karate Brothers. Now, yesterday, we met Ed Parker, known to the public as Mr. Karate, known within the karate circles as the father of American Kenpo Karate. Ed met Elvis in 1960, and later in the 1960s, they began working together much more frequently, but they did work together in the early 60s, and Ed, he's the one that advised Elvis to go to Hank Slamansky to get his first black belt, because then no one could say that it was given to him. because you had to earn a black belt from Hank Slamansky. So Ed knew of Hank. I don't know if he had met him. I'm assuming that he probably had. But he knew Hank's reputation. And he trusted Hank's reputation. And he sent Elvis to him. Ed also recommended Master Ree. So one of the people that had been telling Elvis to go visit Master Ree, it's Ed Parker. And in this picture, you can see Ed and Elvis practicing. They're both wearing black G's. Ed, I think, as well as Master Ree, they were both into the flair and the look of the martial arts. Master Ree preferred the white uniforms, but I think Ed preferred the black. You see Ed in black uniforms a lot, and his students. Now we're going to start today by hearing from Wally J. And Wally J is a man who grew up with Ed Parker. And Wally J says, Ed Parker and I grew up in the same district of Honolulu. I first started jiu-jitsu back in 1935, and Ed was maybe 3 or 4 years old. I lived about a mile away from his family at the time. I didn't really know him, but I knew his brother Arthur, because he was about my age. His sister Frances and I would dance together, and I knew his mother and father. His older sister is related to my wife by marriage. So Wally J, he knows Ed Parker. He's grown up with Ed Parker. They're even related in a way. And he's telling us that Wally himself was involved in the martial arts. And so this is something that a lot of people in Honolulu participated in. Ed was born in Honolulu, and he later worked in a pineapple cannery. And he worked there to finance his trip to the mainland because he wanted to attend Brigham Young University. And Brigham Young University is in Utah. It's a Mormon college. The cannery that Ed worked at was owned by the Mormon Church. And so when he was not able to earn enough to pay his way over, because he ended up having to come over by plane, Ed had a plan to work his way over on a cargo ship that would have been bringing fruit from Hawaii to the mainland. And then Ed had a deal set up with the guy who owned the ship, or the captain, or whoever was in charge of the ship, that he would work his passage, he would do stuff on the ship, and that would pay for his way over there. And that meant when he got to the mainland, he would have in his pocket all the money he earned at the cannery. Well, it ends up that Ed could not go on that ship. That deal fell through. So Ed had to take a plane. And the cost of the airfare was more than $600. And so back then, $600 was more than $6,000 today. So at first you hear Ed couldn't come up with $600, and you think, something doesn't sound right here. That doesn't sound like that. I mean, that's airplane tickets today cost $600, but this was $600 in 1953 or in the early 1950s. So we're talking over $6,000. It was a lot of money. And everything that Ed had earned at the cannery wasn't enough. So the church lent him the money. The Mormon church lent him the money so that he could get over to Utah to go to this Mormon university. And then while he was attending Brigham Young University, in 1953, Ed earned the rank of black belt. So Ed had trained in Hawaii, and he had earned belts, but he had not made it to the black belt. And that's where he first earns his black belt, is here on the mainland in Utah. Now, Will Tracy says Ed's father, Arthur, was a carpenter, and he worked for the Mormon church on many projects, including being a construction supervisor for the church college in Hawaii that opened in 1955. I knew him to be an honest, forthright, intelligent, and humble man. When Ed's father came to the mainland to visit in 1959, it was Ed who paid his way and the expenses because his father did not have the money for the visit. Will Tracy, who is the brother, I believe, of Al Tracy, who we've also heard from, and we're going to hear more from the Tracy family. Turns out they're highly involved in the martial arts. He's letting us know that it was always very expensive to travel back and forth between the United States, the continental United States, and Hawaii. It was very expensive. And so that even when Ed's father came, Ed's father, from a lifetime of earnings and whatever he had to spend on his family and such, wasn't able to save enough money to come over and pay for that trip. Ed had worked an unknown amount of time at this cannery, but he wasn't able to earn enough money to get over here. It wasn't easy to make it from Hawaii to the mainland, to the continental United States. We've also learned that Ed's father's name is Arthur, the same as Ed's older brother, and that they're all involved in the Mormon church, to the point where Ed's father, he's not only a member of this church, they're not all just Mormons. Ed's father is building the church college that opened in Hawaii in 55, shortly after Ed was gone, after Ed had gone to college on the mainland. So that's another reason, if Ed wanted this education, he had to leave Hawaii. And Wally J says, the friend who knew Ed when they were growing up, says when Ed graduated from high school and was on his way to college at Brigham Young University, Professor William Chow asked him to stop and pay his respects to me. He did, and that's when I really met him for the first time as an adult. So they had grown up around each other, and this is very similar to the stories of Red West and Marty Lacker and George Klein and Elvis. They had all grown up around each other. They knew of each other. They could point at each other and tell somebody else the name of that person. They were familiar with you by sight. But while he's telling us he really first met Ed, they really had discussions when Ed came to pay him respects before he left for the mainland. And this professor, he's teaching karate. and he's taught karate to Ed. And so that's the connection that they have together, that brings them together in this way for the first time, even though they've always known each other. And when the United States entered the Korean War, Ed had an exemption from the draft, but he lost that exemption in 1951, and then he received a draft notice. So Ed decided to take his fate into his own hands, and he enlisted in the Coast Guard, and that way he could not be drafted into the Army. So Ed does serve the United States in the military, but it's in the Coast Guard, is during a time of war, but he's chosen to go to the Coast Guard so that he has some agency over his fate. And Will Tracy says that Ed Parker was 6 foot tall and 195 pounds. And when you look at Elvis and Ed in the pictures, you'll notice they're roughly the same height. Elvis was roughly 6 feet tall. And they're roughly the same weight. We've seen in the other series where we're looking at clam bake and all the issues that surrounded clam bake at the beginning of the filming, which included Elvis had gained 30 pounds from his normal 170, and he was weighing 200. And it seems that Elvis fluctuated between 170 and say 195, 200 pounds. 200 seems extreme because everyone noticed that during this clam bake incident as being slightly larger than Elvis would normally let himself get. So I would say that his maximum weight typically hovered through most of the 60s at about 190, 195 pounds. And that his fighting weight, the weight that he made his movies at, the weight that when he reported on the first day he was at, and he fit into the costumes that had already been made, that was 170 pounds. And then he would fluctuate between 10 and 25 pounds. And then he'd lose it all before he began the next movie. So he and Ed are roughly equivalent. I would say that Elvis is usually in better shape in terms of his weight. He's usually not 195 pounds. I think Ed normally was 195 pounds from the pictures. But they're very, very similar. Very similar in build. And Ralph Castro says, I first met Ed Parker in 1954 while we were in Coast Guard training in Alameda, California. I found out about him because he was a local boy from Hawaii like me. So we used to get together and play the ukulele. We passed the time away by entertaining ourselves and our friends. I didn't know at that time that he knew karate. So Ralph becomes friends with Ed outside of karate. Doesn't even know this guy knows karate. Now, at this moment in time, Ed's not yet Mr. Karate, but he has been practicing some form of the martial arts since he was 10 or 12 years old. So he's very familiar with the martial arts. He's probably really good at them, but Ralph never sees him do it. They just play the ukulele together, entertain other people. And then when Ed Parker returned to Brigham Young University in the fall of 1954, he adapted the style of Kenpo Karate, in which he had earned his belt, into American Kenpo Karate, which he taught in the school he opened in Provo, Utah in 1954, which might be the very first karate school in the Western United States. So in terms of business, Ed was groundbreaking. He brought this new form of entertainment and recreation of sport to the mainland, at least on the West Coast. Now, this picture that we're looking at, I don't believe this is his studio in Utah. This is a later studio. I believe this one's in California. But this isn't the one in Provo, Utah. But in 1954, the very year that Elvis records It's All Right Mama, the year that Elvis comes to regional fame that starts his career, that's the same year Ed opens his first school and he begins his career. Now, Ed's 4 years older than Elvis, so it's taken him a little longer, but then again, Ed's already got his military service out of the way. Elvis will get caught up later and have to serve his 2 years. But whatever amount of service that Ed had to give, it's already been given, and he can now dedicate himself to the career. And Gunn's asking, is it talking karate you talk about now? The American Kenpo Karate. Yes, I would say this is the style that Ed is teaching by demonstrating the talking. And if you check the post that I put out today, you can see Ed do that demonstration in 1974. So that's a time period when he would have been teaching Elvis, would have been working with Elvis. Congree would have been in the picture in 1974 as well, but Elvis would still have been communicating with Ed and occasionally working out with him. Maybe, I don't remember, I don't know the dates yet exactly when Ed was most active as a bodyguard for Elvis. I need to get a list of those together. But Ed's also using the talking analogy, and what we're discussing here, for those who didn't see the episode yesterday, is that the way that Ed demonstrates karate is he describes each strike with a portion of your body as a letter. So if you were to strike with your hand, your left hand, that's one letter. Now, if you strike multiple times in a row with your left hand, which you have to practice at to be able to do, this has to be a sequence of movements that you already know, and then you can employ them during a fight. But if you can pull off that entire sequence, that's multiple letters together that form a word. And if you combine that sequence with sequences from other body parts, like your right hand, or your knee, or one of your elbows, or your foot, if you can combine multiple parts together, sequences together, that forms multiple words together, which makes a sentence. So it's not so much that you have meaning to each word or letter or sentence. It's that you are stringing them together in the same way that you would letters into words, into sentences. Now, could there have been meaning, and maybe you were thinking in terms of poetry as you performed the martial arts? I don't know. Ed didn't really talk about that. But when you think about the Oriental or Japanese traditions that went along with the martial arts, and I'm thinking like haikus and such like that, maybe they were internally thinking in certain forms of poetry and matching their movements to certain cadences and rhythms. And therefore they were making sentences of meaning with their movements, maybe lyrics, perhaps even singing songs with their movements. I mean, it's all very metaphorical, but it's the way that Ed tried to communicate the beauty and the thought behind the karate. And Gunn saying, so Reed didn't talk karate. Well, I think if Ed had watched Ree, he would have said, yeah, he's talking karate. But Ree didn't teach talking karate. He didn't see it the same way. He did string lots of movements and sequences together. He just never explained it metaphorically as letters to words to sentences. That's a true Ed thought. Doesn't mean that Master Ree wasn't singing through his body as he did his things. He just didn't explain it that way. So it's really just a communication method to a student, or more to the general public even, because the general public's never going to practice karate. But this tells them that the beauty that they see in the movements, yes, it's put together the same way that lyrics or music or prose is put together. And Will Tracy says that Ed Parker taught a closed group of island boys at Brigham Young University from the fall of 1954 to early 1956. So I believe that Will's telling us that at this school that he opened in 54, you had to be from Hawaii or you had to be Polynesian in order to be part of the program. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it might be because these would be the people who were most interested in the program at the time. And it would have been the people Ed was probably the most comfortable with. And maybe that was enough people to maintain Ed from this period of 1954 to 56. I don't believe it was racist in any way, which there is some implication of that. And then, as we look at this in 2025, we can't help but think of this word as we look back at the way that things were done in the 50s. But I think this is more about Ed is part of a minority, and there are other people in his minority at Brigham Young University. And he's been able to gather these similar individuals together, and they're practicing karate. And Rourke Tracy, she's another member of the Tracy family. She says, my father, Will Tracy, and Uncle Jim Tracy began training with Ed Parker in 1957. And my uncle Al Tracy began in 1958 when he was discharged from the Air Force. So in 1956, Ed opened up the school to other people beyond the Islanders. And Will Tracy, Jim Tracy, and eventually Al Tracy, these are Caucasian individuals who begin to train under Ed Parker. And these are some of his first students. And they are big names in the karate world now or later. They have, I believe, all passed away. I'm pretty sure they've all passed away. Rourke, I think, is still alive. But these people were huge in the world of karate. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. I understand that you're at work. I know that you're at work at both times that I broadcast during the day, but I am happy to hear that you do watch, and I hope that you get something out of the episodes. I believe there's something in every episode that will be new to you and you have never heard before about Elvis. And Adriano Imperato, he says, Ed was an intelligent man, a good businessman, and a good martial artist. I first met him in the 50s when he trained with me for about 2 weeks, and then he went under Professor William Chow. When Ed came to the mainland to go to Brigham Young University, he found out there were no schools of martial arts. He wrote to Professor Chow that he wanted to open a school on the mainland. Professor Chow called me and asked me what I thought of the idea. After I read the letter, I said, why not? There's no martial arts schools over there, and he has the opportunity to open the first Kempo karate school in Los Angeles. So Adriano, he lets us know that Ed's not just good at karate. He's also a good businessman. And he knows how to run a business. And so this could be a good idea for him to open these karate institutes. And Carolyn says that my lives are so interesting. Thank you so much, Carolyn. I greatly appreciate that. Wally J., who grew up with Ed but didn't really know him, knew him by sight, and they met just before Ed traveled to the mainland. He says after Ed graduated from college, he opened his school in Pasadena, California. I think that that's what we're looking at on screen, is the school from Pasadena, California. And Wally says, I said to Ed, you're teaching martial arts. Did you go to college for that? Ed said, no, I went to college so I could talk to people on any level. Ed was so determined and really smart. He knew how to use analogies all the time. So Wally tells us exactly what Gunn was asking about a moment ago, about when Ed explains that the karate is letters and words and sentences, that each movement is a letter, and the movements of one part of the body become a word, and the movements of all parts of the bodies become sentences, is an analogy. And Wally J saying Ed knew how to use analogies all the time. So this is a habit that Ed has to speak in metaphor, to use a story or a parable to get his point across, that he's good at it. And Ed confirms that he went to college so he could talk to people on any level. Well, that's what this is about. He's able to take his ideas and put them into different forms and then communicate them, and people understand. And of course, that's the most important part of the communication. I could talk into this microphone all day, but if none of you understand the points that I'm trying to get across, then I have not communicated, even though I did a lot of talking. And I think we see this in a lot of channels on YouTube. There's a lot of talking, but there's not a lot of communicating. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. And Adriano Imperado, he has a story to tell. Adriano says, I remember one story about Ed when he was playing music to support himself and his pregnant wife, Liliana. Or Lilani, I think is how you pronounce it. It's Leilani. Lilani. Probably butchering that, so if anybody knows, let me know. But I believe this is Lilani on screen that we're seeing now. And Ed and his 4 children, and this would have been in 1960. And we can see that the oldest child looks to be about 7, which would take us back to about 1953. And I believe this story because Ed in the story is supporting himself by playing music, which this is the first we've heard of that. And I have no idea what kind of music Ed played. Or, well, I guess we heard that he played the ukulele with a friend and they were entertaining people, but I didn't understand that he was earning money by playing the ukulele at any point. I guess we could assume it's the ukulele he's playing. And he's earning money to support his pregnant wife. This is before the 4 kids. Or maybe after one of them, after 2. Don't know exactly when this is, but feels early in Ed's life that the story's from. And Adriano says his wife came to meet him and 3 men tried to molest her. He went outside, and when he found out, and he just put those 3 guys away, just like that. That's when he discovered that it was good to open a martial arts school. We've heard that Ed is a good businessman, that he's smart, he's intelligent, and that he noticed that there were no schools for the martial arts in the area, that he's written to his old professor who taught him martial arts and said, what do you think? Should I open this? His professor's taken this seriously. And he's gone to others that he respects to ask their advice to give back to Ed. They think it's a good idea to open this school, but we also find out his wife got attacked. And Ed had to take care of these people with his hands. And then he's decided it might be a good idea to open one of these martial arts schools. People need to know self-defense. Obviously, in this area, there's a need for it. That these people feel that they can go around and molest people because they won't have the skills to defend themselves. There's definitely a market. And it happened to him. And Gunn is saying that it must be like the language, like sign language, that people who use their hands to make the different words. I think it is something like sign language. But the words and the sentences, they all form meanings like aggression, or defense, or block, or strike. They're very simple sentences. Damage, things like that. And that they're a universal language that any of the martial artists from any of the disciplines can watch another martial artist, and even though they may not know the same verbal language, they'll be able to tell you what's happening in their own language, but they'll be able to tell you what the language of the fight is saying. That this fighter is aggressive and domineering, but this fighter is saying things that are defensive and weak. So I think in a way it is like sign language, but I think Ed's just trying to point out you have to learn these combinations. If you ever played Mortal Kombat, the video game, they call them combos. So you have to learn these combos in order to be a truly effective self-defense oriented individual, because you can't just strike a person once. You have to hit them multiple times so that you get all your blows in immediately, and they don't have the opportunity to fight back, because that's the best defense. That's the way Ed saw it. Conree probably saw it very similar. And Ralph Castro says, when I left Professor Chow to come to the mainland, I contacted Ed. I joined his association, and he helped me with my business. I also received my first black belt from Ed Parker. So Ed, he helped people. Like Elvis, he was a generous person. In this instance, he's helping with Ralph's business. That he's supporting Ralph as a new islander who's come from Hawaii to the mainland. And he also teaches Ralph and awards him with his first black belt. And Will Tracy says, about 2 weeks after my brother Jim and I began training with Ed Parker, Ed started an afternoon class with Jim and me as his only students. The class never had more than 4 students at any one time, so it was like having a semi-private lesson each day with Ed. So Jim and Will Tracy, they get to know Ed well, because there is only students in this particular class. And for some short period of time, however many classes that lasted for, they had a very special relationship with Ed. And they got a lot of one-on-one time with him. And that kind of reflects how later Ed will get a special relationship and one-on-one time with Elvis, which is unusual for anybody. It's very special to get one-on-one time with Elvis. And Frank Trejo, he says, I first met Mr. Parker 23 years ago. Now, I don't know when Frank said this. I think it was around 1990. But he says, I first met Mr. Parker 23 years ago. My mom said, Frank, there's an ad here, and they need karate instructors. he was starting an instructor's program, and the ad said karate instructors needed, no experience necessary. What they would do is accept applicants and you would try out, go through a 3 or 4 week program. And at the end, you were given a test of all the material you had learned. They would test you on how well you could teach a basic technique. They would teach you how to teach other people. I was one of the people selected to train to become a junior instructor. I walked in when I was 16 years old, saw Mr. Parker training his people, and knew I was going to do this for the rest of my life. So Ed gave Frank the instruction that Frank would need for the career that Frank went into, for the job that Frank would do for the rest of his life, teaching other people karate. Ed gave Frank the basic building blocks for those teaching techniques. And Ed was so good at communication that he was able to teach other people with no experience, people who didn't know karate. He knew how to teach them well enough that they would be able to teach others. So he had developed these instructional methods. I think Master Ree had also developed instructional methods, but I don't think, and he was very good at communicating. For a person who did not use English as a first language, Master Ree was a very good communicator. But I don't think he was at the same level of communication as Ed Parker. Ed had a gift for talking to people, for getting ideas across, for taking the complex and simplifying it. That's what Ed brought to the table. Plus his amazing skill within the martial arts. Steve Sanders. He says, I started training with Mr. Parker in 1963. I had taken some martial arts in the military and ran across a guy who said that if I really wanted to learn the martial arts, I should go to Ed Parker's school in Santa Monica. I went over there and saw his students, who were very impressive. But when I saw Mr. Parker, I was amazed because I'd never seen anyone who could move the way he did. Steve lets us know it's about more than just the communications. It's the way Ed moves. That Ed has a style that is unlike other martial artists, and that as a martial artist is envied. People want to know how to move like Ed. Steve's also telling us that Ed's students are impressive, which is a testament to Ed himself. Not only is Ed able to do these movements, to be great at karate, he has been able to instruct others, and they too are impressive, very impressive. According to Steve, very impressive. And other people who know about martial arts told Steve, hey, if you really want to know this stuff, you got to go see Ed. So it's not just Lucille Ball, who we can see on screen here, taking a lesson from Ed in the show I Love Lucy. It's everybody who's serious about karate in the Western United States knows Ed's name. And Mike Stone, who is the man that Priscilla left Elvis to be with. He was a karate champion. He says, I have to credit Ed for getting me started in martial arts in California. After I was discharged from the Army in 1965, I spent a few months on the beach, but I got bored with that. I personally did not know that Mike Stone served in the Army. So when I saw this quote, that was the first time I had ever known that. I don't know a lot about Mike Stone. That's one of the reasons I kind of wanted to move through the karate stuff, because Mike does play an important role, although a very negative one, in the Elvis legend. He is part of it, and he has written books now. I haven't read those books. But we can't bring in Ed without also bringing in Mike Stone and Dave Hebler, both of whom connected directly to Ed, both of whom ultimately were negative in Elvis's life. But Mike goes on. I had met Ed back east at he says June Ree's tournament, and June is Jhoon. Ree is the same as Master Ree, so I don't know if that's any connection to Master Ree. But Mike says I had met Ed back east at Ree's tournament. He told me if I ever wanted to teach karate, I should come to California and he would get me set up. So I decided I should do something with my martial arts experience. I came to California and started teaching at his Pasadena school. I taught there 4 or 5 months and then decided to open up my own school in Los Alamitos, California. Ed Gunn says Mike and Hebler, covers her eyes. But they're definitely part of the story, and we do need to understand how they fit in and what exactly happened and what blame they have to bear, if any. Although I won't be making any judgments about whether they're good or they're bad people. I only make judgments about actions. And at this point in time, Mike is a pretty stand-up individual. At least to the very tiny amount of knowledge that I have about Mike at this time, at least in connection to Elvis. He's a fine stand-up individual. It won't be until later. Same with Dave. Won't be until later that actions are taken that turn things. And that's where we're going to leave this episode, because when we come back in the next episode, we're going to learn about how Ed teaches, what people learn from him, and then we're going to be getting into his relationship with Elvis. But it's important for us to know, how did Ed think? Because that's going to tell us what attracted Elvis to Ed. This is a friendship of the mind. It's not just that Ed teaches karate. It's that these two individuals, Ed and Elvis, are able to sit and have long discussions, much like the discussions that Elvis had with Larry Geller. Only these are from a guy who spends his life, his entire career, on a spiritual journey. Larry spends all of his hobby time on spiritual journey. His career is hairdressing. I'm sure there are spiritual aspects to hairdressing, but not in the same sense that there are to karate. So meditation, inner peace, these are, in karate, these are not hobbies or something you're seeking for like Larry was looking for, or like Larry was treating them. They were important to Larry, but they weren't how he was making his living. Over on the karate side, in order to make the living at karate, you've already found the inner peace. You've already found the ways to meditation. And it's important that you do these things every day so that you maintain your inner peace. But I believe that they each reflected, Larry and Ed, pieces of that journey that Elvis was on, the quest, the things that he was seeking, that eventually culminated in How Great Thou Art, and then moved on to the horses and the ranch, and then moved out of the ranch and into the comeback special, and then into the return to the stage, into the gospel songs that become part of not only his nightly ritual after the performances on stage, but that they become incorporated into the performances on stage, and that his performances are preceded by gospel quartets and gospel songs. It's all part of the same journey, I believe. And Ed's a little piece of it. And the next time we come back, we'll see how Ed teaches and what he teaches. But I'm going to leave you guys with a song, like I always do. And this one's going to be Telegram from a Friend. Until I see you all again, you all keep on taking care of business.
The lights came down on Vegas gold. July heat, a crown retold. Applause like thunder, stars aligned. But one true friend was not in line. A telegram, a quiet grace. From 12 years deep, a loyal face. I read your words, they calmed the flame. In all that noise, I spoke your name. I wish you could have been here, Gary. The velvet night, the roaring crowd. But in my heart, your voice was steady. A whisper soft, a faith unbowed. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the haze to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings. The suits, the gifts, the famous hands, they cheered the king, they made demands. But in the mirror doubt would stare, and only you knew what was there. I wrote you lines in trembling ink, not for the press, not for the drink, just for the man who saw me hold beyond the glitter, past the road. Say hello to everyone, I'll be home when this is done. The curtain falls, the echo fades, but you remain my serenade. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the hay to Graceland's porch where silence sings. Friendship wears no stage or wing.